So I think I'll get started. My name is Steve Krecklow. I'm the village administrator here in Germantown. I'll be going through some slides, some information for you this morning related to the referendum on providing water and sewer services to the village of Richfield for a fee. Let me just check, Matthew, do we have anybody on WebEx? Just so that I know if there are folks. Okay, all right, all right. I'll wait just a moment here. The microphone is on, yes, yeah. Is everybody able to hear okay? You can't hear very well, okay. I'll speak up a little bit. So I have 6 kids, so I can be loud when I need to. Um, No one's online? Okay. And if you do have any trouble hearing, please raise your hand, let me know, and I'll speak up a little bit louder or try to get closer to the microphone so that it picks up a little bit better. The village board has placed a referendum question on the ballot for the November 8th, 2022 election. And I'm sorry, my slides are not fully showing up here. So you have to give me a second to pause. Let me close this and reopen it. I apologize, the slides are coming up, but they're not showing the full text here. Not sure exactly why that would happen. This is not my normal laptop, so I apologize for the technical difficulties. Well, if you excuse me for just a moment, I'm going to go get a different computer and see if we can pull it up a little bit better. All right, I apologize for the delay there. Hopefully this will show up a little bit better. There we go. So the referendum is scheduled for this year. That there. I'd like to get rid of that little message there, but I don't see a. I'll have to work around that. So the Germantown Village Board placed a referendum question on the ballot for the November 8th election. The question asks the Germantown community whether the Village of Germantown should provide water and sanitary sewer service for a fee to customers in the northeast corridor of the Village of Richfield, located between Interstate 41, Holy Hill Road, Highway 175, and Pleasant Hill Road. That is an area that's kind of outlined here in pink. If you can see along the east or the west of Highway 41, following sort of roughly along the Highway 175 on the west, Holy Hill Road on the south, and Pleasant Hill Road on the north. Some other areas that are shown on the map here, the area in light blue over to the east of Highway 41 is the Gateway Industrial Park. The Village of Richfield is asking for the water and sewer service as they are seeking to attract development to their northeast corridor, potentially including warehousing and light industrial development. That development would require access to municipal water and sanitary sewer service. Any future development proposals in this portion of Richfield would be determined solely by the Village of Richfield. So they would have control over what developed in that area that was highlighted in pink on the previous slide. I'll also point out here on this slide, you'll see a red line going through this map. That's been of interest to some folks. That's the subcontinental divide. That's the area in Richfield where everything to the east of this line flows into the Lake Michigan watershed. Everything to the west of this line flows into the Mississippi watershed. If I could, if you hold questions, I'll get to the end. I'll be happy to answer all the questions, but I may get to some things here before we get to the question part. There has been what's called an intergovernmental agreement that's been negotiated between the two villages that would govern the sale of water and sewer services, as well as the operation and how things would work. Some of the key elements of that intergovernmental agreement, Richfield would bear all the costs for the expansion of services to customer of Richfield, all of the infrastructure, all of the pipes, all of the work that needs to get done to expand, to provide those services. Customers would pay a 20% premium for sewer service. Richfield customers would pay the same water rates that Germantown residents pay as set by the Public Service Commission. And Richfield would have to construct all infrastructure in accordance with Germantown specifications. We maintain a development handbook that outlines all of the specifications that are required for that type of infrastructure expansion, and Richfield would be required to follow that. The IGS also provides protections against future encroachment on Germantown services, including no permit for additional connection to Germantown water system shall be issued without notice to Germantown. And all installations of building connections have to be approved by Germantown's Building Inspection Department. There's some other terms that are of key interest. Richfield shall pay the cost of the initial installation of municipal and water and sewer system improvements. That includes the design, construction management, obtainment of necessary approvals from like the DNR and the Public Service Commission, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, MMST, and the acquisition of easements that are necessary. In addition, Richfield will fund the cost of infrastructure improvements in the village of Germantown as well as in the village of Richfield at an estimated investment of between $7 and $9 million. Richfield has to design and construct all municipal water and sewer system improvements consistent with our developer handbook and specifications and with the approval of Germantown's engineering department and utilities. Richfield will bear all the costs associated with acquisition of easements within Germantown necessary to provide service exclusively in Richfield, and Richfield shall pay 50% of the land acquisition cost for any right-of-way acquired in Germantown. Sewer rates will be set at 20% higher than the rates charged to Germantown ratepayers. Water service rates for Richfield customers will be set at the same rate as Germantown ratepayers as determined by the Public Service Commission. Germantown and Richfield, we have commissioned several studies from hydrogeologists, engineers, and other experts. And here's a brief summary of those studies. Germantown may benefit by increasing the customer base for its water and sewer utilities by having non-Germantown property owners helping pay some of the capital costs associated with those utilities. The Germantown sewer utility has the capacity to serve Richfield's northeast corridor without any negative impacts to Germantown now or with projected future growth. And additional compatible development in Richfield's northeast corridor may drive economic development within the Germantown Holy Hill corridor. So the question that is on the ballot reads as follows. Shall the village of Germantown provide water and sanitary sewer service for a fee and on an ongoing basis to customers in a portion of the village of Richfield pursuant to the terms of an intergovernmental agreement between the village of Richfield and the village of Germantown? A yes vote would result in the execution of the intergovernmental agreement that has been negotiated so that Germantown would provide water and sanitary sewer services for a fee and an ongoing basis to those customers in the northeast corridor of the village of Richfield. A no vote would mean that the negotiated intergovernmental agreement would not go into effect and Germantown would not provide water and sewer services. So the election, as I stated earlier, is on November 8th, 2022. Polling places in Germantown open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Wisconsin voters are required to show an acceptable photo ID in order to vote. We do have early voting here in Village Hall starting October 25th through October 28th, then October 31st through November 3rd and November 4th, with the hours listed on the slide here. And at that point, I will open up to questions. What I will ask so that everybody's able to hear okay is if you have a question, if you could come up to the podium. I'm just going to turn on the microphone and we can start fielding questions. All right, any questions? You want to start us off?
My name's John. Is anyone from Richfield here going to speak?
No.
No? Why does Richfield want to hook up to Germantown? What's their motivation for this?
They are.
It cost? Is it cost maybe, or?
Richfield is looking to develop a new business park in the area that was identified on the map on the earlier slide here. They do, in order to put the types of development up that they're looking to attract, they do need water and sewer services. They did a study that looked at 3 different options for obtaining sewer and water services. One was the village of Germantown, one was the village of Jackson, and the third was developing their own sewer and water utilities. That study indicated the most cost-effective for them was to approach Germantown and purchase sewer and water services from us.
Is there any thought given to how to end this agreement in the future? Suppose Richfield eventually wants to develop their own infrastructure. They want to then connect this to their new infrastructure that they're building. Anybody talking about, is it just going to, is this an agreement that goes into perpetuity, or does it have a lifetime and have to be renewed? Or what's that?
It's an ongoing agreement. There is no specific end date. And part of that is because of the length of the lifespan of the infrastructure that's put in place. If at some point in the future, Richfield decided it wanted to go a different direction and either construct their own utilities or go to another municipality, we'd have to enter into negotiations to end the agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions?
Does the current Germantown sewer infrastructure, will it handle the extra capacity, or does that have to be, it sounds like maybe there might be some work done in the Germantown sewer?
The studies that have been completed indicate that the Germantown does have the capacity to handle the flow from this area of Richfield. The intergovernmental agreement limits the amount of both of water that they can use, and it does limit the amount of sewer that we'll accept from Richfield, from this area. The other limitation on Richfield related to sewer is the size of the pipes that would be connecting to the area to be served. So our engineers did complete analysis that looked at the amount that would flow through those pipes and further downstream, and indicated that we do have capacity throughout the system to provide this service.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
So I'm not connected to the city water, but I have a private well. I'm concerned about, could this affect my water table? What happens if the water table goes real low? What's the future of that?
We did bring in a hydrogeologist who looked at that issue, specifically related to what we would call well number 12. That's the new well being constructed up on Rockfield Road. We did go through significant testing of that well when it was under construction, including some high-level pumping out of that while monitoring 5 of the neighboring residential wells in the area. The results of those tests were reviewed by our hydrogeologists as well as engineers from the Department of Natural Resources. And they indicated that it was very unlikely that the operation of the well, including at the levels to provide service to Richfield, would not have an impact on residential wells.
Currently?
With the new well in operation. So if the well is, when that well is producing at the capacity that's allowed by the Department of Natural Resources, it's unlikely to have any impact on residential wells.
So if the whole water table does go low, say we're getting into a drought system or okay. Are there systems, a process set up that the DNR will say, okay, we have to limit what's taken?
That's really a difficult to foresee, an unlikely scenario. Currently, the water tables are rising, as reported by the hydrogeologist who did the analysis here. The water table that we're drawing off of is the same water table that's being used by a large number of municipalities in Washington, and Waukesha County. So if it got to the point, if there were some, drastic, changes in the water table in the future, it's likely that the DNR and the Public Service Commission would come out with some new guidelines to try to help. There's probably at least 500,000 people that get their water out of this water table. If it reduces to the point where it's causing issues, I believe the state would probably step in and take some action.
Does Germantown get like priority, I guess is what I'm looking at, over Germantown residents or?
Over Richfield?
Yeah, yeah.
No, under the PSC rules, when we're providing service, if we provide service, the Richfield customers would get the same level of service as Germantown customers.
My understanding is that this tower's already been built, but it needs to go taller.
It is under construction. The village board made a decision to increase the height of the tower by 35 feet. That allows the tower to serve a corner of Germantown that is, actually, I'm not sure if we can see it on one of these maps. It's a small triangle on Freistadt Road, west of Highway 41, over by, I think it's Faith Journey Church, and west to Town Line Road. There's an area of Germantown there. When we were performing the studies on designing the water tower, one of the things we learned is that that area could not be served unless the water tower was raised higher. So the village board did make a decision to raise the tower 35 feet in order to serve that area.
That would have been done anyway.
That is independent of the Richfield. So yes, that is the plan, and that is under review by right now the DNR and the Public Service Commission for approval, but the approval is not related to Richfield Sewer and Water.
My name is Herb Nickel. I live on Merkle Drive, and we've lived there for 64 years. By the way, what is your name again, and what is your function here?
I'm Steve Kreckler. I'm the village administrator for Germantown.
Okay, good. I am aware of the growth in Germantown, of course, and I have some real reservations about extending what you're talking about here in that regard. I believe that the village should have a responsibility for the life of the people who live here. And in my opinion, in the last 20, 30 years, that has not been followed. And now you're still talking about a 2050, I believe, study that's going to say, okay, we can do this. Well, I'm concerned about that. How does that fit into this? And in all honesty, I live, as you probably are well aware, over near the big construction site where everybody comes there from 41, 175, Merkle, Freist, you name it. It's a real hub, especially in the morning and the evening. And now we're going to add to that. And I don't understand how that's going to happen, technically or economically. So do you have any inkling as to how this additional traffic and noise that's created by this sort of thing? And the other question I have regarding this is, I would certainly like to see some of the financial studies that apparently have been conducted according to
what little I read about the actual changes that you're proposing here. I don't know. Do you want me to continue or you want to address these?
Well, I can, let me start out with the 2050 Comprehensive Land Use Plan was just recently adopted by the village board and the plan commission. The plan commission took final action last night on that, so that has been adopted. The plans, for example, if the referendum is approved, the plan for the route for the sewer and water from Freistadt, or from Holy Hill Road down to Freistadt Road is consistent with what was adopted in the 2050 plan. So that was taken into consideration in negotiating the intergovernmental agreement. As far as the traffic goes, the village of Germantown and the village of Ridgefield did conduct a traffic impact analysis related to growth in general along the Holy Hill interchange on Highway 41, and that information was provided to the State Department of Transportation, and they're looking at that as they're planning for the eventual replacement of that overpass, or upgrade or replacement of that overpass there. So that has been reviewed, and it is something to that the village is taking into consideration. I guess regarding some of your other comments about I think the desirability of additional development, I think that's why the village board put it out for referendum, so the citizens were able to weigh in on whether or not this was a change that the citizens found to be desirable. And, I don't think anyone on either side of the issue argues that it would result in additional development, both on the Richfield side of 41 and on the Germantown side of 41. And whether or not that's something the community wants is the question that's on the referendum.
Does the village board ever consider the, I don't know, opinions of its residences relative to a good living place for families?
I think that's why the village board put it out to referendum, so that the residents could make that decision.
That's passing the buck. This has been going on for a long time. It seems to me every time there's a piece of land that isn't being used critically, the village board comes in and they sell another automated facility for manufacturing and so forth, which then creates problems, not only at that point, but also in traffic and noise and all the rest. I came to Germantown because it was a very nice place at that point to bring up a family, raise a family. And that was okay for a few years, but then the village came along and they started building or promoting industry in these other places. And of course, that just lowered not all, but many of the desired things that a family would like to have when they have a family growing up. I think that's why I'm concerned with the village plan 2050, whatever. Of course, I probably won't be around since I'm about 90. But this is a situation that people don't even think about. The citizens who are paying the taxes and are living here and getting around, and schools and all that kind of stuff. I realize that indeed these people, the trustees, whatever, are taking that into consideration, but I don't think they're putting enough emphasis on it to really satisfy the people of this village. Anyway, I think that answers my question. I would like to see, though, some financial records or studies that indicate what you said have been done in order to make this decision. Was that done by the board? Do they have the capacity to do that?
If I can kind of talk a little bit more about how the finances work. Um, the water utility in particular is governed by the Public Service Commission. So
What is?
the water utility. So
yes.
that's governed by the Public Service Commission. And we did go through about a year and a half ago a complete rate analysis where they take all of the data, all of the lists of all of the assets that the water utility is responsible for. They look at all of the operating expenses, the growth in expenses or costs, and then what revenue trends look like, and they set rates based on that. That is a process that would take place in the future if this is approved. The PSC won't do that analysis before the agreement is in place. So, but what their policies are, and I think what we can say definitively is that they will set those rates to recover the costs. And if costs are significantly different for Richfield, they would adjust the Richfield rates accordingly. I don't think that that's likely to happen because it's a fairly small size. But they will look at the costs and the revenues related to the Richfield service and make sure that those rates are recovering the cost. The sewer utility is not governed by the Public Service Commission. We have to follow a similar process. So if the agreement is approved, we'll hire probably the same firm that we used to work with us on the water utility rates. And they'll go through that process and add 20% to the Richfield rate. So they'll be paying a premium on top of that. So there's not, I don't want to, I don't, we know that based on the terms of the agreement, that the rates will be set to recover those costs. But the analysis hasn't been done to determine exactly what those rates will be.
So has the 2050 projections been completed?
The 2050 plan has been completed, yes.
Doesn't include then some of the things they're talking about.
The plan does not set water or sewer rates. It does look at over the next 50 years, like which portions of the village would be desirable to have water and sewer service extended and provided. But it does not include an analysis of the rates for water or sewer utility.
Just for your information, which you probably are aware of, as I said, I live on Merkle Drive, and we've lived there for 65 years almost, and we still don't have sewer.
Okay.
And that is a separate issue. But nevertheless, it's going to happen that they're all going to fail, and every sewer is not permanent.
Right. I can say that in the past, when sewer and water service has been extended, for example, when it went down Freistadt to Goldendale and then north on Goldendale, the village's policy has been to basically stub out the sewer mains so that when subdivisions or people would like to connect, they're able to. And I think if this happened, the extension for sewer would go further west down Freistadt, and then as it got closer to the freeway, would then turn north. So it may provide some additional opportunities for neighbors to connect.
Well, we do have sewer not far to the south where we are. Anyway, it's still a mess.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have a quick question. Is Richfield voting on this also?
The Richfield is not having a referendum, no. Okay.
What
What's the anticipated increase in load on the water and sewer system? You expect, for example, a 10% increase or a 30% increase, or has that been calculated, or what are the numbers on that?
The agreement does limit the amount of water that's utilized at 0.077 million gallons per day. That would be, I believe, less than 5% increase in the overall load. It's, just to put it in perspective, that would be less than what we typically provide to Gale Foods when they're on, they are sometimes on Germantown water, they're sometimes on a well. So that, and when they're on the well, they use more than that amount on a daily basis.
So 5% is relatively negligible then, okay. Is Germantown going to be billing the Richfield people directly, or is Richfield going to establish their own system and then, we send them one bill for the whole thing?
We looked at that in the process of negotiating the terms of the agreement. And the agreement as it's written, and so what would happen is we would bill the customers directly. We would install the meters, we would monitor, audit the meters, and we would bill them directly.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Scott Heffley. I live right down the road on Old Farm, been on sewer and water my whole 27 years there. Been coming to meetings regarding this. I know Mr. Krecklo and the other people in the room. The last one of these that they had, maybe I can provide a little clarity, and Mr. Krecklo can provide some clarity. With regard to the fire protection fee, which we all pay as residents that are billed for water, gentleman brought up last time that there's an inequality built in the IGA, whereas Richfield would not have to pay for those fire protection services that are billed to all of us. I think he was looking for clarity on that. Maybe Mr. Krecklo could offer that when I'm done with my comments. Other thing too is in the flyers or the information going around the village, it was mentioned that I think we finished an agreement on an IGA with Menominee Falls going back to 1992. I think Art Sabella was the village board president. So we had agreement to share water, share services with Richfield that terminated because they are doing other things, but we provided water. So I like to see some sort of a finish to this, not just forever. Forever is a long time. Perpetuity is a long time. Whatever word is, this foreseeable future is a long time. And I don't like, as a taxpayer, I don't like paying things forever and ever. I like to see sunset provisions and things. So the thing I did notice about the 92, I looked into the 92 Bancroft IGA. It's an IGA we had, right? And specific costs were mentioned to help this gentleman here. Specific costs. This is what was mentioned. This is why. This is what it's going to cost. This is why. We did that in 1992. Why we can't do that in 2022, I don't know. But I think, like this gentleman says, we need to know numbers. Guesstimates aren't numbers, okay? I don't like that. I mean, my degree's in finance. I work in finance. Nobody wants guesstimates. They want real numbers. So that's an issue. When you do projects like this, there's something called a pro forma balance sheet. I know Matt knows what those are. Mr. Krecklo knows what there are. They should be out for you people to make your decisions on. That's just an opinion of mine. So I doubt that Germantown Water Utilities will make enough money off this agreement to make them whole. They've been running a deficit for a number of years. You can look it up. And we just had a big water increase. Those of you that live in the village of Germantown, big water increase to help shore up the water utility because they haven't had a water increase since 2014. This is real things, okay? So we did that. We agreed to that. We're doing that. PSC said, okay, great. I don't know that we'll be able to collect enough revenues from water from Richfield because we can't upcharge them because the Public Service Commission says no to recover that if we were running a deficit until we had a 65% increase in water this year. So that's a concern. I see the number 7 to 9 million, Steve, and those numbers are from a couple of years ago, where a year ago, project costs had to have gone up. I know that borrowing costs have doubled. So is Richfield still good for the 7 to 9 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 12 million? People will say, why do we care? Well, because it's going to affect us if they have a situation where they have to open a TID to do this development, which they do, and the development costs get out of hand and the borrowing costs get out of hand. Where does that leave us? The reason I say that is I've probably reviewed the IGA 3 times, and the IGA has vague language in it compared to the 1992 Bancroft IGA. Vague language, no protections for Germantown taxpayers, in my opinion. So I don't see them. I'd like to see them. And I don't know if those are specific questions, as it were, but Steve, I gave you a couple of questions. So.
All right, thanks. I'll try to hit the questions and let me know if I missed anything. First, with the fire protection fee. As some of you may be aware, if you were following the village board discussions on the water rate increase a year ago, or if you're a water customer, you may see this line on your water bill. The village started charging a portion of what the Public Service Commission calls the fire protection fee. And what that is, it's the Public Service Commission looks at everything that the water utility does, all of its costs related to infrastructure, all of its operational costs, and it determines or makes an estimate of what part of those expenses are related to having sufficient water supply and pressure available for fire suppression. So it's not related to the fire trucks or the firefighters or the fire station or anything that you see other than the fire hydrants. It's the cost of having those water mains large enough, having the hydrants put in place, so that when a fire truck needs to connect to it, that there's enough pressure there that they can put out a house fire when necessary. And the PSC separates that out as a separate cost, and villages have options for how they pay for that. They can either put that on the property tax or on the water utility bill. And the village board decided to, it's historically the village has done that through the property tax. And the village board is doing part of it through the property tax, but part of it on the water bill. So there's a piece of it on each. They kind of compromised to put part of it on the water bill and keep part of it on the property taxes. The question that came up at the last information session was whether or not the village of Richfield would have to pay that fire protection fee. That's a decision I can't say with 100% certainty whether or not they would, because that's a decision that the Public Service Commission would make. What I think would probably happen is that the Richfield customers would have to pay the public fire protection fee, just like Germantown customers do, because we will have hydrants over there that the Richfield Fire Department can hook up to put out fires when it's necessary. So I believe that'll be the case, but I can't say for certain because that's a decision that the PSC would make if the intergovernmental agreement goes forward. The second question was related to the Menominee Falls Agreement. And that is something the Village of Germantown has had an intergovernmental agreement in place with the Village of Menominee Falls since 1992. That was put in place. Initially, the Village of Germantown provided sewer and water service to the area where the Pick and Save is, off of County Line Road. And that agreement has changed over the years. That was put in place because at the time, Menominee Falls could not provide service there. About, I want to say 4 years ago, the Village of Menominee Falls came to us and asked to modify that agreement. They were able to start providing service to the mall area around Pick and Save, but they wanted us to provide service for the new senior housing development over by Grace Lutheran Church. So that area is currently receiving sewer and water service from the Village of Germantown through that agreement. I believe that agreement also is on an ongoing basis. There is no specific end date to that, although it is something as Menominee Falls expands their system, they may come to us at some point in the future and say, we no longer need you to do this, so we'll start providing that on our own. Trying to remember now I should have been taking notes, Scott, when you were. Project costs, yes. Scott was correct. The project costs are a few years old. And I think it's very possible that they could be higher than the $7 to $9 million that was estimated. Whatever those project costs are, the Village of Richfield is responsible for 100% of those project costs. And the Village of Germantown is not obligated to pay any of those project costs. So. Sure. Yeah, come on up, Melanie. Yeah, sorry.
Melanie Smythe. Just to tag on to what Scott was saying, he asked about a pro forma. He talked about the water income not necessarily covering maintenance costs. And this is what I'm adding, we don't actually have what the maintenance costs are for our current system, let alone the new system, which obviously, hopefully, wouldn't need maintenance, at least initially, for a while. But we know that there are significant maintenance needs within the existing system. So I'm tagging those things together for you to address. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Regarding a formal pro forma document for the water and sewer utilities, what I would say that their pro forma documents are the rate case analyses that are looked at by the PSC or in the case of the sewer utility that are approved by the village board. And as I stated earlier, that type of analysis, particularly for the water utility, the PSC won't do that until an intergovernmental agreement is in place. What we have looked at the numbers and done the analysis that we are able to do at this point, looking at anticipated sewer and water revenues if the agreement is put in place. Based on the first phase of development that Richfield is expecting, the revenues, combined revenues for sewer and water would be about $150,000 per year. When the entire area of the northeast corridor of Richfield is built out, and assuming that that the vacant land gets built out in a similar manner to what we've seen in the Gateway Industrial Park in Germantown, eventually total sewer and water revenues would be closer to $1.3 or $1.4 million per year. What we don't know, what I can't work into those numbers is the timing of that growth. I don't know if that growth would take place in 5 years or 25 years. And that makes that type of analysis a little bit more challenging as well. As far as the maintenance expenses go, the types of operating maintenance that would have to be done is each year. For example, hydrants have to be exercised, where our crews go out and they open and close the valves on each hydrant. And they do that each year so that they don't rust close, that they're able, in an emergency situation, to be opened. As sewer systems age, the sewer crews will televise the lines and make sure that they're not obstructed, and if necessary, they'll do cleaning. There will be, if this goes forward, there will be a lift station on the Richfield side that would in essence pump the sewage into our system. And that, although as Ms. Smythe, mentioned, when these systems are new, for the first 5 to 10 years, there would be very little in terms of maintenance that would be necessary. That would increase for some of the operating components, like the lift station, probably 15 to 20 years out, would require some, replacement of machinery, of upgrades to systems. Could cost somewhere, in the range of $100,000 to $200,000. The pipes themselves, these would be the PVC, the heavy PVC pipes, which are expected to have a useful life of, anywhere from 60 to 80 years underground before they would need to be replaced. And the charges that the PSC sets, or that the village board sets for the utilities, includes a factor for depreciation. And that was where, when Mr. Heffley was mentioning the water utility was short in past years and the rate increase was needed, the water utility was covering all of its operating expenses, but was not recovering enough of the depreciation to set aside money to pay for future infrastructure replacement needs. And that was why the rates went up in that case. But the rates are set, and our goal is to keep up with this in the future, so that it recovers the depreciation, and the utilities have the money to replace the equipment or infrastructure when it wears out and needs to be replaced. So, any other questions?
Is the lift station Richfield's responsibility?
They would pay for it, however, we would operate it. We would own it and operate it. And repair it and maintain it. Any other questions? All right, I thank everyone for coming. If you do have other questions, we do have a email set up, referendum@germantownwi.gov, where you can send in any additional questions you might have, or you can call Village Hall and ask for me, and I'll be happy to talk to you by phone and answer any questions you might have. And there is one additional public information session that's coming up next week. I can't remember if it's Tuesday or Thursday, but it's coming up next week. So thank you very much.